and welcome to my channel. It's Naomi's Bible Club. So this channel is brand new. This is the first episode of the first series on this channel, and it's the first time I've done anything like this. And basically, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I want to do. It's a club where we can all come together and listen to stories that may not have been told as often as some of the other stories in the Bible. Now, we all grew up with Noah's Ark and Moses and Joseph and David and Goliath and things like that. And they were all centered, the central character was a male, obviously. And we know lots about them. But I want to talk about the stories that we don't hear, especially the ladies. So us as women in our times now, we often look to the Bible for solutions and answers that resonate with us and how our lives are with perhaps our husbands and our children. And I myself can say that I've read the Bible and I've found times where the stories of people like Moses or Joseph have given me hope and given me inspiration and influence into how I can reflect that into my life. But as you all know, with the virtuous woman verses, Proverbs 31 verse 10 to 11, it does speak so highly of women in those verses. It makes you think, have they had influence in the story of Christ, in the Bible itself? So I want to start with telling the stories of the women of God. That's the first series. And hopefully it will resonate with you as much as it did with me, because hearing about what some of these women did, some of the influence and the importance of these women just being in the right place at the right time with the right character to push, maneuver or influence the right people to do the right thing, just in time to fit God's plan for things to go exactly the way that he wanted it to. So first, my first episode on my first series is going to be about Abigail and how she influenced David. David, the one from David and Goliath. King David, him. What did this young lady have to offer the story of David? Let's set the scene. So, we start when we first introduced to Abigail in 1 Samuel 25, and that's her story. This is where it tells you all about her. She's only a little bit in there, but it's got enough in there for us to learn a little something about her. And it begins really just after Samuel's death. Now, Samuel was a very highly respected prophet of God for Israel. And he had, prior to his death, he had anointed David to be the future king after King Saul. So the rightful heir, basically, after King Saul. Because King Saul had somehow upset God. He hadn't been following God's law or commands that he'd asked him to do. He'd actually broken some of the promises he'd made to God. And so God seeked out a new king for Israel and set Samuel out to find him one. And he found David, which was at the time a very highly unlikely future king. But anyway, he had anointed him, and this was known. And because of that, King Saul had it in for David, unfortunately. They were once friends. They were once in the same household. I think even David was married to his daughter. But King Saul just had it in for him. So David, well, before he was king, David was on the run, basically. And so after Samuel died, he moved out to the desert of Paran, which was just on the outskirts of where a certain gentleman called Nabal was living. And David moved 600 men and his animals and all his weapons, and he moved out into the deserts where he was hiding from King Saul, basically, who was trying to kill him. And he moved out there to protect Nabal, this very wealthy man of that area. to protect the sheep, and because he was a sheep shearer, a sheep herder, Nabal. And he protected the sheep and the shepherds and all the servants of Nabal in the desert land. This land was harsh. It was only sporadically vegetated, and it was dry valleys and things like that. So not only was he protecting them from the land itself, but he was protecting them from attacks from animals or people looking to steal the sheep for wealth. So that's what he did, and he was doing that for request of payment from Nabal, this extremely wealthy man. And he'd been doing that. He actually was doing that. And he spent some time just living there and hiding and keeping it all set up camp there to protect Nabal. Now, let's tell you a little bit about Nabal. He was like his name. His name actually means foolish, senseless, or even wicked. That's the name. That's what his name means. And in the Bible, names are extremely important, the meanings of them. And so he actually reflected this character. He wasn't necessarily a nice person. He was extremely wealthy and extremely successful and very good at business, clearly, but not necessarily a good character. And then he had this wife, and this is where we're introduced to Abigail. She's described as wise, intelligent, shrewd, beautiful, approachable, nice woman. And you would think, why would these two characters be married? Like, they don't sound like they should be together. And, we could say it was the wealth on her part. Maybe she wanted to marry him for that. But we have to remember that in these times, it wasn't necessarily the woman's choice. Girls were a commodity to their fathers back then. It wouldn't mean that they didn't love them, but it was a way of, girls were precious items to be given and expect something back for it. And with Nabal being extremely wealthy, then perhaps Abigail with her beauty caught his eye and he wanted to marry her, and her father exchanged her for perhaps some sheep and handed her in hand of marriage to him. So it's a good reflection of Abigail's character, because if you think, even the most sort of foolish and wicked man, richest man in the area, sought her out to be his wife. And she really, if she didn't want to, she would have had to anyway. And she wouldn't have been the type of character to complain about that. She would have been a good wife. I'm sure she was. So this is her. This is the life. This is how she lives as a noble woman, well dressed, well looked after. Remember, he's extremely rich, Nabal. And anyway, David's been looking outside of the area that they actually live, out in the desert, looking after Nabal's servants and sheep. And he hears that it's sheep shearing season. Now, sheep shearing season is like harvest, basically. It's the abundance time. It's the bringing in the wealth. It's paying off your debts. It's hospitality to your staff and strangers. And it's party time. It's festival. It's banquet. You bring in all the money. You pay all your debts. You have a whale of a time. This is a good time. This is a good season. This is a happy time. And everybody's happy. So David hears about this from the servants that he's been protecting. They said, oh, it's sheep shearing time. It's, it's good time. It's, for us, it would be like, a birthday. Well, Christmas, something like that. We all get together and celebrate. So David sent a couple of his men to go and see Nabal and request. So David was out there with 600 men. And so he requested food and refreshments for 600 men and his animals. It was very politely requested. Just, if you can find it, if it's there, could you spare some food and refreshment for us? Us guys that have been looking after your staff and your sheep for all of this time. Very well, might I add. So he sent that request to Nabal, and Nabal didn't really respond with the best response. He was quite rude, dismissive. He basically turned around and just said, who is David? Who is that? Who is the son of Jesse? He minimized David's role and position to, I don't even know if I don't know his father, he's nobody. He pretty much insinuated that he was just a runaway servant. And why should I give away my food and wine to someone I don't even know or where they've come from? No, I will not send anything to these 600 men that have been looking after my keep. The reason for this abundance this year, he didn't send anything. So David's men went back to David to relay this to him about what they'd said. Now, David's immediate response was with vengeance and retaliation, and rightfully so. He'd been spending months, maybe years, looking after Nabal and was offered nothing for his time, not even a thank you. And so David immediately took 400 men, weaponized them up, left 200 to look after the animals that they had, and set about on revenge. He was going to attack Nabal with no warning. He was going to attack Nabal and his men immediately, like he would be in there within that day and seek his revenge. Now, in the meantime, unbeknownst to David, one of the servants that had been looked after by David had overheard this conversation between Nabal and David's men and knew instantly that this is not going to be good. There's going to have repercussions for this. And he obviously knew that his lord, his boss, was a fool and could not bring himself, well, it could have been a girl, bring themselves to speak directly to Nabal. So he sought after the only person he knew that would potentially listen, and that was Abigail, the lady of the house, the noble lady of the house, the one that must be kind to her servants perhaps, and listened. So he went to her immediately, and he obviously didn't feel scared of her, so she must have been like sort of kind and approachable as well. You know, he could have felt like he was being in danger to go against his master, so to speak, and say, oh, you know, and speak ill of him. You know, he said something silly to his wife. He could have gotten in a lot of trouble for that. But he didn't. He was speaking to Abigail, this wise and intelligent woman who listened to everything he had to say and also knew immediately that this was not going to be good for her household and all the people that lived there. So she immediately took her time, took her choice to meet David, and she gathered as much food and water and wine and things. So she got skins of wine, she got loads, 200 loads. She got cakes of raisins, cakes of figs. She stocked up basically for these men, loaded up the donkeys, sent out the servants on donkeys, and then said to them that she will follow. She was going to go herself. This isn't just, you know, the housewife up the road. This is the lady of the manor. This is she people come to her. She doesn't go to them. And she got on her own little donkey and she followed up there. And she rode out there. And she found David in the valley. She saw him coming with vengeance. Now imagine this. This is David. This is David that killed bears protecting his own sheep. Killed lion protecting his own sheep. He killed Goliath. He's coming with vengeance. She was worried, panicked. Her household is about to be slaughtered for the sake of this foolish man that she's married to. And she went out without telling her husband either. She bypassed him. She knew that there was no point in speaking to a fool. The Bible even says that. Her husband, and back in those days, this was a dangerous mission. You don't just bypass your husband, who has already made a decision. And you don't just ride up to another nobleman and seek him while he's coming out for vengeance and war. As a woman, that was not your place. So she was in danger in both ways. She didn't know how David would receive her, and she certainly didn't know how Nabal would take what she was doing. But she went anyway. She had the bravery. She's a hero. And she went out there, she found David. And when she saw him, she jumped off that donkey and she lay down in the dirt in all her beautiful robes and clothes. She lay down in the floor, face down, and begged him and implored him for mercy. To take no heed, bear no mind to my foolish husband. He's like his name. He's a fool. Please don't listen to him. Please take these refreshments. Have mercy on me. Put it upon me. And she declared herself David's servant. She gave herself as the sacrifice, so to speak, for her husband and for the people that were there. She also then spoke over his destiny, that God had planned for him. She told him how wonderful he's going to be as a king and what things he's going to achieve, and that this bloodshed was unnecessary at this point, for he will have other wars to fight. He will have other things to do, and this one can be prevented if he please just take these refreshments as repayment and an apology. And David, it was almost like he was immediately appeased. He was at ease with Abigail's presence. He was impressed with her good judgment of making this decision to come. He told her that thank you, and if it wasn't for you, in the morning all the men of your household would have been dead. They'd be gone. She'd saved all of their lives just by that one thing, that brave thing, that quick thinking. And he sent her back in peace. He said, go home in peace. Thank you for the refreshments. And he took them back to his men. And she went back home to her husband, who, when she returned, was in the midst of a huge party. He was having the time of his life, well, drunk out of his mind, drinking with his friends and his servants. So she looked at him and she thought, there's no point in speaking to him. He doesn't even know what I've just done. He won't even take it properly. He won't even be thankful. So she went to bed and she slept. And then in the next morning, when she awoke, she went to seek her husband. And he may have had a bit of a hangover, but the alcohol was starting to wear off and it was clearing up. And his mind was becoming a little bit easier to be able to make sense of the words that she had to tell him. And so she told him. She said, I had to go out and meet David and 400 of his men, because he took 400, and stop them from coming here to slaughter you. He said that he was going to kill every man in this household. You would be dead this morning now if it wasn't for me. Because of your foolish words, because of your quick to just be rude and obnoxious and arrogant and unkind, and certainly not give hospitality to people who had been helping you. You know, the servant that came back to speak to Abigail, he said that David and his men had looked after them so well, night and day, that not even one sheep had been injured, let alone died. Nothing had ever happened to them over David's watch. And Nabal just disregarded him like he was nothing. And Abigail told him all this. He said, you're foolish. How could you do this? Look at the gravity of the situation you got yourself into. And when Nabal was told this, he immediately, the Bible describes some sort of medical issue. It comes across like heart failure or a stroke. And he's unable to move, like the life is falling out of him. And for 10 days, he's a walking dead man, barely walking. He can barely move. And then on the 10th day, he does die. Nabal's died, but nobody else at the household. And when David hears, he says, praise be to God. And that's because instead of David taking revenge for himself, God took it for him. And God often tells us Revenge is mine, that we are not to seek our own revenge. If someone does you wrong, leave it to him. And in this case, David was going to, and rightfully so, to avenge his bad treatment by Nabal. But instead, God placed Abigail in the right place at the right time to prevent David causing more bloodshed on his hands, because he has a better plan for him in the future. And then God took vengeance for him himself, and David didn't need to do it. And this is how Abigail was used. Her wisdom and intelligence was placed in just the right place. Let's say she was never married to Nabal. Let's say she hesitated instead of going to David. Let's say even the servant was placed there at the right place at the right time to be able to have the bravery to hear the conversation and go to Abigail, because Abigail was approachable enough for that servant to come to. She was the right character for that part of the story to move forward, for David to not kill all of those innocent people. And David must have been super, super impressed with Abigail, because when he also heard about Nabal's death, he sent for her to come and marry him. And her response again was immediate. And she again put herself on the ground face first and agreed. Absolutely. I'm going to go and marry David. And remember, she's a noble woman. This is a woman of wealth, because her husband was super, super rich. Much richer than what David had at the time. He wasn't king yet. He was on the run, remember? So she got on her donkey, got some of her women, I think it was like 6 of her female servants, and she rode out on that donkey, and she went to meet David and married him. And she lived a life on the run with him, because she knew that this was God's plan. This was God's choice. This is God's man. He's about to become king. Irrelevant to what was happening at the time, she had faith. She had faith that what God said will happen, will happen. At the time, King Saul was still trying to kill David, and he was still king. She married him anyway. She even had more trouble a bit further down the line because of who David was. She and some other of the household, I think one of the other wives, and some of the other household was once kidnapped by the Amalekites, kidnapped her. And David, like I say, David isn't somebody to be messing with. He got his men again, and he went in there and he got his wives back in his household back from those people. He went straight in there. This is nobody to mess with. I mean, you already know he's killed a giant. You need to just steer clear and keep him sweet, really, especially when God is on his side. And so then David did become king, and she became queen of one of his queens, and she did bear him a son. And it seems that they must have had a good life, a good marriage. There was never any more trouble in their marriage. So that's Abigail's story, and how she influenced David and where he went from there. And Nabal, she was there. He had opportunity to learn from her himself, but he chose not to. He chose arrogance, denial of God's plan. And she didn't deny God's plan. She heard about David being king one day, and she chose to follow God's plan and his faith, and threw herself at the feet of God's plan. And she was honored for it. She was blessed for it. And so was David because of her. Now, what can we take from Abigail? Many things. I mean, one of them seems like you can disobey your husband, but maybe only if he's a fool. So let's keep that in mind. But yeah, just having the honor and the bravery. For me, Abigail's story, it's the bravery of doing this. It's probably one of the reasons why I've chosen to have her as my first choice, because I know I've been in many situations where I've not wanted to go against somebody else's choice because I don't want to upset them. I don't want to feel awkward. I don't want to make them feel bad for being bad. And how stupid is that? She didn't actually approach him until he was in the right mind to hear her. Again, that's intelligence. And so I can take from Abigail, that we can put ourselves in situations that seem dangerous, but they're the right thing, or they seem scary or fearful, but it's the right thing to do. And I'm doing this. I've been scared of doing this for a long time. And I'm putting myself out there to tell you stories that I like out of the Bible. Like I say, that we may not have heard as much or as in depth. And especially the women. I just want to, you know, heroes and villains. Not all the women in the Bible are good, and not all the men are. So I want to tell the stories of the women first and then the men. And I hope something in this story resonated with you. And, you know, if you can take something from Abigail, what would that be? Maybe comment what you took from Abigail's story and read her for yourself. Go and read her story. I mean, read the virtuous woman as well so just to get, because I need you to know that women are highly praised, highly praised. And so 1 Samuel 25 is her story, and virtuous woman is Proverbs 31 verse 10 to 31. So have a read of those and come back to me, tell me what you think, and I will look forward to telling you about the next lady in the Bible that I'd like to talk to you about. And I hope you enjoyed. I hope to see you soon.